Okay, so we're continuing in what we're pretending to be Sivan Kuf Chav Gimel Halach Chaval and Chofes. So we're continuing the din of if what makes wine usher. So we saw, this is a reminder, that the Chacham said, you're not supposed to read the white words. Okay, the Chacham said there's three ways to make wine usher. To make wine usher, if the guy touches it, if he makes it move through his koichai, we call it, and through Nitzuk. Okay, Nitzuk is when it gets connected through pouring. And so the first one we spoke about last time, through touching. And this time we're going to talk about Beis and Gimel, koichai and Nitzuk. Okay, but first, I want to just point out to you that when we say that through touching, the point is that it can become asur b'hana. Okay, that min hadin it can become asur b'hana. That's going to be important for today. Okay, and the following is a chazara of what we did last time. Okay, now it's like this: if a guy touches wine, so there's three conditions in order to make it asur b'hana. Okay, which is the most serious. It can be asur b'shtia u b'hana. He has to have had intent to do it. He has to have it with kavanah. He has to touch it with his hand, and he has to do shishach. He does all three of those. Then the wine is asur b'hana. B'shtia and b'hana. Okay, now that din is only the ikra din. Okay, if you remember what the Chazon said, he said this is asur midina, it's asur b'hana b'shtia. Okay, but nowadays means to say is with the goyim that we interact with, who might touch it, those goyim are not that are there for desire, but they're not there for desire in a way that they pour wine for it, and therefore nowadays it's only asur b'shtia, but it's mutar b'hana. Okay, the Shach said that's only b'makom hefsid, but that's such a thing that we step down and we say it's only asur, it's only b'shtia, but it's mutar b'hana. Okay, now what if you're missing some of these things? Okay, if you're missing shikshach, then mi'ikar hadin it's asur b'shtia mutar b'hana. In which case that nowadays we step down one and it becomes completely mutar. Okay, it's only b'diavad that it's mutar, but it becomes completely mutar. Okay, what happens if he didn't touch it with his hand? Okay, then the simple reading is that's asur b'shtia mutar b'hana, but there's really a little detail to that, and that is if he did negiah aydei davar acher without his hand. Okay, I'm sorry, negiah aydei davar acher shloi b'kavanah. Okay, he didn't have kavanah and he didn't do it with his hand. Then ikar hadin it's mutar b'shtia b'hana. And if he did it with a different body part, and instead of touching with his hand, he touched with a different body part, but shloi b'kavanah, that's what the case is. Asur b'shtia mutar b'hana. Something doesn't look right about that, but anyhow, fine. Okay. So, yes, that was pretty quick, wasn't it? Mm-hmm.
So that's like
davar acher.
That would be davar acher.
That's like the davar acher. That's last time. That's the davar acher. So, yes.
I was visiting a friend who's a fancy doctor who's starting.
Okay.
And he got from a client. He got a bottle of non-kosher wine. So he asked the rabbi, and the rabbi told him, "Can't give it to somebody else's gift. You have to throw it away."
Right. So that's because the wine is. If he's Sephardi. Okay. So the Sephardi don't hold this bottom line over here. The lower line is nowadays that the government not there, blah 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 that kind of stuff. So it's stam yain. It's stam yain. If it's stam yain, it's asur b'shtia b'hana. Yeah, you don't have enough from it. So he can't do anything. But why is he give it? If he gives it to somebody else, then he gets enough because he's getting benefit from it. Right. Yes. I'm sorry. We're Ashkenazi. So the whole bottom line, this idea that the goyim nowadays, so the goyim that we interact with, the European goyim, the Catholics, are not by pouring wine. That's not for start. That's not Ashkenazi. Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to talk about. So today we're going to start by talking about koichai. Okay, so what's in a koichai? The guy makes the wine move. The simplest cases, the case Shulchan Aruch starts with, is he poured it. He poured you a cup of wine. Okay, he did the koichai. So what does the Chacham say for that one? Just a kitzer gets right to the point. Zeh ein asur midina ela b'shtia. Okay, that something that's aydei koichai is never asur b'hana. It's only asur b'shtia. Okay, it already starts off the whole din starts off on a low level. Okay, so before I tell you some details, about what koichai means, to me was a very obvious question. Okay, and that is like this. Okay, what were the conditions in order to say that a guy touched wine? Remember, touching wine is potentially asur b'hana, and koichai is only asur b'shtia. What did it take to make it asur b'hana? You have to touch it. And you don't have to touch it with your hand. You can do aydei davar acher also. Almost everybody held that aydei davar acher counts. That's considered touching. In a container is also considered touching it. You have to, with kavanah, and you have to shechshach. So what's missing when you pour the wine? Which one of those factors is missing? When you pour wine, okay, we can manufacture cases that you you do koicha without touching it. You could do koicha in a covered container, like you pump it along into a pasteurizer. So it's in a covered container, it wouldn't count as shukshuk. Okay, but why isn't every koicha an example of negiah? The guy picks up the bottle of wine and pours it over to the guy, so he's touching it through the container, which again, we said last time, almost everybody holds that's considered touching it. The wine got poured, and so what's he, and the kavanah, so what's he missing? Why is koicha, why is there ever such a thing as koicha? Why isn't, again, we can manufacture cases, but the simple case of pouring wine, seemingly, is a case of negiah also. It's just negiah de l'avracha. What's the difference? Okay, so there's two-part answer to that question. Okay, the first part comes from a basic documentation, who subtly, they don't say exactly the same thing, but they almost say the same thing, and they say is that when wine pours out of a container, that's not considered shukshuk. Shukshuk means is you got to shake it up. Okay, just pouring it doesn't have the shukshuk. I'm not exactly sure why. That's not considered. That's not shaking. Shukshuk doesn't mean it moved. If you read the words by itself, you say shukshuk means it moved it around. It didn't move around. It had to have been shaken up. Okay, so when you pour, somehow pouring doesn't have the shaking up, and pouring is not the same thing. Okay, so they say it's not considered shukshuk at all. You don't have shukshuk, then you're not doing negiah, and therefore you could talk about the second thing, which is maybe it's koich. Now, then there's a second stage to that point, and that is the Rosh is the kasha. We mentioned this Rosh last time, in passing. The Rosh is the kasha. He says, okay, there was no shukshuk. Here's news also. Believe you, there's no shukshuk, but you poured it. He says, pouring is the way you serve avodah zarah. What could be better than pouring it? You're saying it's not shukshuk. Okay, it's not shukshuk. So it's that, but it's it seems to us the most like avodah zarah. That's what you do for the avodah zarah. You pour wine from the avodah zarah. So what does it mean? So let's not be shukshuk. Okay, it's not shukshuk, but it should be even worse than that. That's the Rosh's kasha. It should be even worse than that. So the Rosh says like this. The Rosh says the answer is Shema ikal member the hainu dafka b'fnei avodah zarah. The only time that when pouring is the way you serve the avodah zarah is when you're standing in front of it. Okay, when you're in front of the avodah zarah, you pour the wine for the avodah zarah. But aval shaloi b'fnei avodah when you're not in front of the avodah zarah, ein derech lishpach el l'shachshech. He says maybe. I guess he didn't know, right? Neither do I. Maybe when you're not standing in front of the avodah zarah, you don't do pouring, you do shukshuk. I mean, even though we always hear about pouring wine from the avodah zarah, that's when you're standing in front of the idol. When you're not in front of the idol, which is of course what happens, when he touches my wine, he's not in front of the avodah zarah. He's in my house. So when he touches my wine, he pours my wine, he's not in front of an avodah zarah. So then, the way you serve the avodah zarah is by shaking up the wine instead of by pouring it. Okay? He doesn't mean McCarthy, but he's sort of like reading between the lines of the din here. Okay, the din says shukshuk is to make it touching. Pouring is only considered is a lower level. It's called koicha. So he's saying maybe that's not how they did serve avodah zarah. Okay.
Does anybody have an idea of the cultural reality of this shukshuk?
No, I don't. No, I poked out a little bit. You know, I don't have so many friends who do avodah zarah. I don't know, especially shalom with avodah zarah, no less. So I don't know. I can't tell you. And I don't know what it means.
So that's very hard to us, the whole thing. Right?
Yeah, but so we saw last time that the din of shukshuk came from a Gemara. That did come from a Gemara. The Gemara about the guy with the esrog with his sticking his hand in. The Gemara said it's only us if you mishachshuk. And so but so that by piecing it all together, it must be that when you're not in front of an avodah zarah, you do shukshuk, and when you are in front of avodah zarah, you pour in with whatever that means. The point, I never saw someone pour wine from avodah zarah either, but I'm just used to it. I've heard it. I've heard it enough times. What?
How do you know?
How do I know? Okay, you heard it enough times that in my mind you pour wine from avodah zarah. Okay, that's in my mind that you do that. But shukshuk, that's new stuff, and this Rosh said, well, it depends if you're in front or not in front. Like, okay. Anyhow, so now let's go to some of the pratim of this din of koicha. The first is the yid. It's got to be that the yid made the wine move. Like, if he poured it, he made it move from here to there. I'm sorry, yes, the guy has to make the wine. Right? Look at that, that's pretty wild. But it even says in my notes, okay, so the guy's got to make the wine move from here to there, okay? So, what happens if a yid and a guy did it together? Okay, if they did it together, so Shulchan Aruch has all kinds of details about it, but by and large, if they did it together, it's not considered koicha. Okay, it's only considered koicha if the guy did it by himself. It's even less than Shem It's even less cases than that. Even things that might for Shabbat not qualify, it's good enough for this din. As long as the guy is not doing it completely by himself, it's almost always mutter in that case.
What is all lumbus in the avodah zarah?
I don't know. Beats me. Okay. Then there's another din. The din is, we pass that koyach also counts. Not only if it says koyach who does it, but even if a secondary koyach counts it. But a third koyach does not count. Okay, the Shulchan Aruch's case is that it's not what you think of koyach koyach like it, that for killing somebody that you banged it on this thing, that banged on that thing, and that thing. No. It just has to be 3 layers of separation. Okay, the case of Shulchan Aruch is the yid presses a board, turns a wheel, that presses on a beam. Okay, so in Hilchos Shabbos kind of things, in Hilchos Ritzicha, that's not considered koyach. But for these, then there's 3 layers between me and him. I press this thing, that presses the wheel, that presses the beam, that touches the wine, and that's considered koyach. That's also not considered koyach. Okay, so just I have to tell you 2 things about that. One is the Shach says that kula of koyach is only b'diavad. He says there are 10 layers between me and between the guy and the wine. That's also b'diavad. This is only b'diavad. It's mutter, and some of the Achronim assume that an electric motor doesn't count as that. And you think an electric motor, you're off the hook, because you push a button, it touches the wire, it touches the motor, it's like anything between me and him, and they say, no, sorry, it doesn't work like that. That's considered koyach if you press the button, which is the common case, right? The guy turns on a motor to move the wine from here to there. I don't mean in a house, in a factory kind of a setting. The common way you bang it the koyach is the guy by mistake turn on a pump. You're not supposed to, okay? The wine had to go from here to there, so he put on the pump. Okay, that's koyach. He just made it move.
Not even there.
So it's right, they have this straight out good old fashioned koyach. Okay? Okay, now, it's very related to that. So you're used to thinking, I'm going to only eat hand matzah because I want it to be the yid who made it. And they say, guess what? Mikra didn't, it's probably considered that it was done with shmo even if he did a machine. So it's an opposite. What? Or if it's same thing. We want to, you're machmir when you do the mitzvah this way. Right. We're machmir when we do the mitzvah. You're correct. We're machmir when we do the mitzvahs like tzitzis and matzah. We want to have as much hand and less machinery between me and them. But for this, it's the opposite. The chumrah is to do the other way and to say that it is koyach. Okay. Now, another thing is, it's only considered koyach if there's a connection between the guy and the wine. I think it says guy in this case. Okay, between the guy and the wine. But what happens if the guy throws something into the wine? Okay, so he got the wine to move, but he didn't touch it. He didn't. There was no connection between him. I don't mean touching. I mean like a connection because he threw the thing into it. So the din is that case is mutter.
So if he threw an apple at the on button.
If he threw an apple at the on button, yes, that would be fine. But so wait a second. So you think it's like a crazy case, and so would everybody else. What do you think?
He threw the esrog into the barrel.
So the case in the Shulchan Aruch is, you'll hear why in a second, the case in Shulchan Aruch is, they threw a rock in. Okay? So Taz says, well, he threw a rock in, so it's mutter, but the evidence, okay, don't worry about it. Taz says, but wait a second, it's asal l'chatchila. He says, why is it asal l'chatchila? He says, remember a few times ago, we spoke about, it's the same Taz, we spoke about a few times ago, that the guy can't pour grapes, even before Hamshacha, into the pressing equipment. I don't know if you remember that with the videos. You can't pour the grapes in. You can't put even before Hamshacha. The Gemara says it's asal l'chatchila because maybe he'll do it the wrong way. Maybe he'll do it even after Hamshacha. So the Taz says the same Xer applies over here also. If you let him throw things in, he might actually move it directly or touch it directly. So Taz says asal l'chatchila. How come the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say that? The Taz says that. It would be asal l'chatchila. He says, how come the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say it's asal l'chatchila? He says, because no meshugah, of course you're not going to let him throw rocks into your wine. Okay, you don't have to tell you that l'chatchila you shouldn't do that, because nobody l'chatchila is going to be thinking about throwing rocks into the wine. So, but in theory, it's asal l'chatchila. So comes along the Sefer Yin Malchus, which I told you about way at the beginning, the Sefer Yin Malchus from a contemporary person, and he says, I have a case of the Isra L'Chatchila. The guy says, in theory, the Isra L'Chatchila to throw rocks in, but of course no Meshugah is going to let the guy throw rocks in anyhow, so that's why I didn't say that. So the Yin Malchus says, I have an example. He says, what if the guy wants to throw in the yeast, or the potassium metabisulfite? Okay, the things that you add into the wine. He wants to push the button to dump in the yeast into it, or there's other additives into it. So there, you want it to be in there. Okay, so then the Taz says l'chatchila, he's not allowed to do that. Even though his thing will never touch, and it will move it by dropping the stuff in. It will make the stuff move. What? Well, you figure if you throw something in, like the Shulchan Aruch, you throw a rock in, it makes it move. Moves the wine a little bit. That's not l'chatchila. But the evidence is going to be mutter. But l'chatchila, you're not supposed to do that. Okay, just an interesting application. The Taz says he doesn't have an example of a l'chatchila for that.
And they wouldn't be adding any fermenters back in the day.
No, I don't know why he doesn't give that example. He doesn't think of the example. Well, in those days, the yeast was just on the peel, They didn't ease it.
Anything else?
I guess not. The Taz says the reason why the Shulchan Aruch,
I got it.
it was one din right after the other.
I
You know.
because it's someone's habit.
No, okay. So in the Yemach, he said that's an example for
That's
this.
the other practice of the guy is doesn't have.
I'm sure the guy don't touch anything until it's Mavushal. No, there's no guy nearby. Okay. So now till now we're talking about the Ikar Hadin, that if you do Aydei Koichai, then the wine is Asher B'Shtir Umutter B'Hana. But what happens if the guy does it Shloi B'Kavana? What happens if the guy moves the wine Shloi B'Kavana? There's a condition of Kavana here also. If he moves it Shloi B'Kavana, there's this Mutter B'Shtir U'B'Hana. And therefore, almost everybody means everybody except for the Taz. Okay, it's a Shach and Dr. Mervaver and Krieger. Everybody says, except for the Taz says, that therefore, even if he did it with Kavana, it's only Asher Midina B'Shtir. But for us nowadays, it's a Mutter B'Diavad B'Shtir B'Hana. What?
Kavanah for what?
Up to know that he was pouring. He didn't knock over the bottle. He didn't knock it over.
Kavanah that he was pouring, Kavanah to move it.
Same thing. It's Kavanah to get it moved. So pouring. Let's say he poured it. He thought it was apple juice. That's Shloi B'Kavana. He didn't realize he didn't tip the thing over by mistake.
But he didn't mean for it to move. He just wanted to get it in.
If he wanted to get from here to there, that's moving. That's Kavanah. Okay, but if he didn't know, he thought he was moving apple juice, or he banged into the machine. Okay, he turned it on by mistake. He banged into the thing and he hit the button. That's Shloi B'Kavana. That man had din is Mutter B'Shtir B'Hana. But just about everybody says. But even if he did it with Kavanah, but nowadays meaning with the kind of gun that we interact with that don't do these kind of things, then the evidence would be Mutter B'Shtir B'Hana. Okay. So one more thing. Okay, fine. Okay, now on to our last thing now. That is. Okay, I'm sorry. This is another slide. This is the old slide that you saw before, just to show a contrast to you of the difference between when he pours the wine and touches the wine. Okay, when he touches the wine, it's the possibilities of becoming Asher B'Shtir B'Hana are much more serious, and there's many more conditions. And for the pouring of the wine, things are more straightforward. That's why I put these next in. I didn't remember anything. Okay, fine. Okay, the last thing we had was Aydei Nitzuk. Okay, Aydei Nitzuk. That if it's through a connection through pouring, Nitzuk Chibur, a connection through pouring. Okay, and the simple cases like this. You have a Yid who has a bottle of wine that's not Mavushal. Okay, and he pours that wine into a cup, and the guy is holding the cup. Okay, the guy is holding the cup, and you pour the wine into the cup. So Shulchan Aruch says, if the wine that's pouring is kosher, he's pouring non-Mavushal wine that's kosher, and he is pouring it, and it comes into a cup, and the guy has the cup, gets the cup in his hand, and now the guy is meshachshech. Okay, he shakes up his cup that he has, or he drinks from it. Okay, that's a kind of shishon because by drinking from it. In those cases, the wine that's in the cup is now yain eser, and now it's considered as if it's connected back to the wine in the bottle, and the wine in the bottle becomes usher. Okay, the wine in the bottle becomes usher. So this is one of the reasons why most hashkachas, including us, will not allow non-Mavushal wine at a kosher event. The simple reason is because if you have non-Mavushal wine, a guy might touch it. You become usher. But even if we say, okay, nobody can touch it, only the waiters can touch it, the waiters will Shem Shabbos. Okay, the Shem Shabbos waiters will touch it. So no one ever touched the bottles, it's still not allowed. And the reason is because when you pour it into the guy's cup, either he'll be meshachshech and the cup will become usher, and it'll go back to the bottle, that'll become usher.
So the guy is by the event, you think?
Yes, someone's at the you don't know who's going to be at an event. He's going to be meshachshech and go back into the bottle, or he asks for a refill. Okay, if he drank from the cup and there's some left in the bottom of the cup, and then he comes and says, "Hi, can I have some more, please?" Okay, then when he gives you some more, when you give you more, when you give you more, you're pouring it into wine. The wine that's in there was usher because he drank from it. Okay, that's considered shikshuk when he drank from it. So then when you pour it into the bottle, when you pour into that cup, it's going to be usher.
So very fascinating stuff.
Which is?
Just always give a brand new cup.
So there are hashkachas that will do it, and what they'll do is the Yidden will always give out new cups. They'll have it comes out it's not by events as much as by wine samplings. Okay, there's such a thing as a wine sampling event. By a wine sampling event, there will be such a thing. There was not Mavushal wine. And each person give you one cup at a time. It's very hard to control it. It's very hard. We wouldn't do it. And you realize also before you take your cups back, you have to rinse all your cups before you put them into the dishwasher because you're putting stam yain into your dishwasher.
Let's consider trade. So when
It's strafe. You can't put it into your dish. So before those glasses go back, you have to rinse them also. And it's very hard to control. You imagine, I'm pulling out cups, and I say, here's your cup, sir, okay, and he grabs and touches the other guy's cup. So we wouldn't let it. We don't let non-mavusha wine any of these kind of things. But there's such a thing. There are hashgachas who do that, and it's a one-way street. You know, you can only get...
But someone's emailed us complaining we're so strict that we don't allow non-mavusha wine
send
events.
them a link to the
No, so the easier reason why we don't non-mavusha wine at time at an event is because then the bottle's on the table. So the only way to even dream of it is to have the waiters have from what
Houston, whatever.
And what happens if the guy says, hi, I'll take a cup. Okay? And so he pours it. He says, oh, you David, pass it over to me. He has the non-Shem Shabbos to pass it over to me. So you just pass me treif wine. Whatever. Okay, so...
I understand. We got comments from
No problem.
So practically in a wine factory, right?
Mhm.
So they have this big vat with a little spigot at the bottom.
Yes.
You can't even open the spigot at the bottom of the wine tasting.
Oh my gosh, if he opens a spigot, we skipped a lot of those dinim in Kufchav. Hey, we skipped a bunch of those dinim. Sometimes if he opens a spigot, or even closes the spigot, it's because he touched the stuff inside.
So what happens? So it means everybody Shomer Shabbos.
Until it's mavushal. Until it's mavushal. Once it's mavushal, then they're safe. Right? But if it's not mavushal wine,
So when they produce non-mavushal wine, everybody in the factory is a Shomer Shabbos?
or the stuff is sealed. Right. If they seal up the openings and closings from the tanks. But Goyim can't touch and turn on pumps, they can't do anything until it's mavushal. Right? That whole factory has to be not mavushal. Has to be Shomer Shabbos people until there. So yeah, it's quite a pocket. That's why they like to make mavushal wine. It makes it a lot easier to function.
What points do they generally do bishul right away?
So we talked about that. We talked about that in America. It's common to do bishul before even hamshacha. Okay, before it can even become treif, they do bishul before, and then once they clear, they make themselves safe. Okay, so excuse me, 3 details about nitzuk. Okay, the first is nitzuk. There's a common misconception. Nitzuk doesn't mean that the wine in the bottle is treif. And I've been telling you that it is treif. It's not what it means. It's not that the wine in the bottle is treif. It means it's as if the treif wine in the cup is mixed into the wine that's in the bottle. Well, usually that means that the wine in the bottle becomes treif. Okay? So if there's an ounce in the cup and there's 3 ounces in the bottle, then the wine bottle is treif. But what happens if there's just a few drops, like the case I told you? The guy left a few drops in his cup and there's a whole bottle worth of wine in the bottle, then it's bottle. Okay? It's
shake, right?
Bishishim, because it's wine and wine. It's shishim. So it's bought the bishishim. So that means that it's not automatically if the wine in the top bottle is treif. It's often treif, but not necessarily. It's as if they're mixed together. What?
As you pour.
As you pour, it gets worse. Well, the guy's holding it.
It keeps getting bumped.
Keeps getting bottled. No. So it's not that it's considered. The Shulchan even says it that way. The Rambam speaks out the idea that it's bottled with shishim, but the Shulchan says it. It says as if they're mixed together with each other. So if they're mixed together with each other, it means it's just that this treif wine is mixed into this kosher wine, which often means that it's treif, but it's not automatically it's treif. Okay. The second thing is
In the rest of Terubis, do we say Nitzuk?
no. So I take it back. We assume that we do not. There's a Ramah in Simkuf Bays, maybe, that sounds like there's such a thing. Everyone assumes know that it's a special wine din. Okay? There assumes to be a special wine din, not a din for other places. Okay, so now, the second din is, look at what the Chacham Satan says. It's highlighted over here. Okay, he's not the one who says that. I'm just using it here because it's easier to see it. The example of Nitzuk is you pour wine into a cup. Okay, it's usher. It has to be that you pour it into wine that mi'ikar hadin is usher b'hana. If you pour it into wine that mi'ikar hadin is mutter b'hana, just usher b'shtia, Nitzuk doesn't apply. Okay, so now if you look
That lotion sure sounds like it's also menadin in the bottle.
again.
That lotion sure sounds like the bottle is also menadin, not Terubis.
Okay, if it'll make you feel better, I'll give you the shulchan aruch. Hamar yain l'toch kli sheyesh bo yain over kichavim haser b'hana nesa kol hayain shebekli ha'elyon v'royim ki'ilu yain shel iser mu'urav b'shel heter. Okay, and the Rambam says like, this is just an introduction. This is I'm sure I don't have the quote here for you. I'm sure he says the same thing. That's considered as if it's mixed together. He says, but the Chacham says, which everybody says, it's only if the wine that's usher is usher b'hana. Okay, well, look at Aleph and Beis. Which one of those is usher b'hana medina, and which one of those is only usher b'shtia medina? Well, only if the guy touches it is usher b'hana medina. If it was like a karcha, it's not usher b'hana medina. We care what the ikra din is, not what the din l'mais is, what the ikra din is. So the Shach says, so if the only issue of the wine is that the guy poured it, then there's no problem with nitzuk. Now you realize that that's a very realistic question, because when a guy pours it, he's holding the top of the bottle also. So Nitzuk going back into that top bottle is a serious question. Should the wine on the bottom was poured, the wine on the top was not poured yet, should we make the Nitzuk out of that? So the Shach says, no, because the wine that only, the one on the bottom, is not Nitzuk. Okay? But he thinks that he sees a dig that in one of the Din Shulchan Aruch, but he says, I have to tell you something. But the Shulchan Aruch himself says in Kuf Hey, Shulchan Aruch himself says that Nitzuk does work by koicher. He says not on Kashrus yain beer v'yotza yain sharei yain bami koicher. It's Kuf Hey is about koicher. It's also because of koicher. Umash nisher b'kli. What's left in the top bottle? Also gam kim shem Nitzuk. Okay, and the Rambam agrees to that there's an issue of Nitzuk. There's an issue of Nitzuk even through Aydei Koicher. The Shach says, I don't really understand why. It doesn't make sense. The rule is, you only answer things Aydei Nitzuk if the thing that it's going into is Asur B'Hana, and Aydei Koicher, it's not Asur B'Hana. It means that thing is not Asur B'Hana, it's only Asur B'Shtir. So the Shach thinks that it's mutter. The Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam, he tells you. The Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam say not like that. The Chacham is Machmer. I assume most people are Machmer on that thing. Even though like in the logic we don't get it so much. The Chazon Ish says that that's only true if we're talking about if the, okay, not connected to this, sort of connected, it is, what happens if the wine was only usher because it was touched by a guy who's not over Avodah Zarah B'chlal, okay? Not one of our goyim, not one of our goyim who we say it's over Avodah Zarah but is not over through pouring. He's a Muslim, or he's an atheist, okay? He's not over Avodah Zarah B'chlal, then there's no problem with Nitzuk. Okay, that one would be also, might be also b'shtir, but it's not, there's no issue of Nitzuk. Okay, the last thing is that this din that Nitzuk chibur is a shayla whether there's Nitzuk chibur. The Gemara talks about it. The Gemara sounds like Nitzuk chibur is a problem. It's a machlokes Rishonim if we pass it like that. So, some Rishonim will make and say Nitzuk is not a problem of chibur. So the Mechaber says that in cases of hefsid meruba, you could be making and say Nitzuk is not chibur. Okay, so you only have to be choshesh for Nitzuk in regular cases where hefsid muad, but not for hefsid meruba. And over here, the Ramah says a very, I don't know, to me it was unusual, a definition of hefsid meruba and hefsid muad. Okay, so usually you think of hefsid meruba, there's a big loss, and hefsid muad means a small loss, right? That's what you usually think. The Ramah said, no, for here the rules are a little bit different. If it's coming from a very big container, like a vat or a barrel, he says that's considered hefsid meruba, even if there's only very little wine in there. He says, and if it's coming from a bottle or a cup, then it's hefsid muad, even if it's very expensive. Okay, so the hefsid meruba and muad has to do with how big the container is. Okay, if it's a big container, it's coming from a vat. In ladies' cases, it's coming from a vat, and the guy does a Nitzuk back to it. That's hefsid meruba, even though it's just a little wine at the bottom of the vat. And if he's pulling from a bottle, and the bottle's very expensive, that's hefsid muad. Because it's come from a bottle. Bottles and cups are considered, like little containers are considered hefsid muad. Big containers are hefsid meruba. So to me that was unusual. And that's what the Rambam says. That's what the rules are, hefsid meruba and muad.